All right, good morning or evening or whenever, class. Welcome to week number 5. That is right, week number 5 of your 7314 class, which is your reference class. As always, I am your professor, Dr. J.S.K. Austin. And this week, what we're going to do two things. And those two things are, we are going to do a state of the course update. And then I'm going to soapbox a little bit on Wikipedia. The reason why I do this is to kind of contextualize, again, why I assign this Wikipedia assignment. So, and it is my favorite assignment that I have in any of my classes because, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. But first, let's go over the course update, the state of the course, and I'll let you all know what's happening. Okay, so the first things first, yes, I am about halfway finished with the grading of the virtual reference assignments. I will have those done by Thursday night. So I apologize for you who have not gotten your virtual reference assignment grades yet, but you'll have those within the next 2 days. And the reason why I am trying to go ahead and get those banged out is because if you did your APA citation wrong, and some of you did, then I am showing you in your virtual reference assignment what you did wrong, and from there what you can do is you can correct those mistakes on the Wikipedia edit assignment, okay? And by the way, yes, the Wikipedia edit assignment does require you to use outside sources, and by outside sources, I don't mean sources that, an outside source can be your textbook, but I'm just saying you do need to cite sources, you do need to build upon the readings or in other writings of other people. So when I say that there is a citation style format, which is APA, and I will be checking for APA, proper APA use in the Wikipedia assignment as well. When I say that the Wikipedia assignment requires you to use APA and requires you to use outside sources, yes, I am expecting that you cite other authors. It can be your textbook. It can be stuff that you found on through Interlibrary Loan. It can be stuff that you found through the library databases, stuff that you found on Google Scholar, whatever. You can even, if you want to, you can even cite the blogs of reference librarians or that sort of thing. You can Google librarian blogs, and you'll find a whole lot of them out there. And doing any of that stuff will kind of show that you are that you're taking in knowledge and you're building upon the knowledge that you're reading. So that is the reason why, yes, I do require that you use outside sources or sources that you can't just make this entire paper something that's you talking about just your experiences and that's it. Yes, I do need you to incorporate the literature that other people have produced. And a lot of you did that with your virtual reference assignment. The overwhelming majority of you did, but some of you didn't. And for those of you who didn't, you got docked. And I want you to avoid getting docked for those points on this next assignment. So yes, please, please, please be about your business, okay? Now, the LibGuide, again, is not due until, I hope you all are working on your LibGuides. You need to be working on your LibGuides, and you need to be working on your semester-long projects. Your LibGuides, again, are not due until Sunday, July the 24th. Until then, just keep working. Also keep working again on that semester-long project, which is due on July the 29th. And yes, 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 you do need to go ahead and be ready to turn in your Wikipedia edit assignment on this coming Sunday, which, what is that date again? That date is the 10th. So be ready to turn that in on the 10th. Again, it takes most of my students that I've asked, say they were able to finish that assignment in about maybe a day or 2 days, between 1 or 2 days, and usually it's between about, I guess, 5 to 8 collective hours. Some of you will probably get through it much faster, but you know, the Wikipedia edit assignment is not something that is going to be super time consuming. But the semester-long project and the LibGuide, they're both very heavily involved. So make sure that you are continuing to work on those things so that you don't have just a terrible time those last 2 weeks, okay? And with that said, yeah, let's talk about Wikipedia. All right, now the reason why the Wikipedia edit assignment is my favorite assignment really is because you can use the Wikipedia edit assignment to actually, in my opinion, make the entire world a better place. And I know that that is something that perhaps Dr. Jace is romanticizing just a little tad bit too much, but here's what I would say about this, is that most assignments that you end up doing, especially in the core curriculum, are going to be assignments that no one sees except for you and your instructor, unless you share it with other people, put it in your e-portfolio or whatever. But when it comes to the Wikipedia edit assignment, this is something that does affect the outside world. So if you enhance the Wikipedia page, even if it seems to be the most obscure Wikipedia page you could ever hope to edit, the thing about that is that page still is a page that somebody is probably going to come across at some point in time. And so the reason why I think it is important, relevant, whatever the case may be, to have a Wikipedia assignment that does kind of contribute or give back and have something real life out there is because what happens is your Wikipedia assignments are seen by more, your Wikipedia edits are seen by more than just me and you. Hopefully your Wikipedia edits will stick. They won't necessarily stick. There are going to be some of you who have your edits kind of already erased within a few days or possibly within even a few hours of you making your edits. And if that happens, that's fine. I told Wei Ling in one of the questions on the question discussion board, I did let her know, and I'm letting everybody else know now, that as long as you have your screenshots, if somebody undoes your edits or your changes to your Wikipedia page, that is okay. You don't have to try to redo it. You don't have to pick a different page. You don't have to do any of that. Just as long as you have your screenshots, just turn in your screenshots. And you can put, in your reflection, you can put that you are kind of, I guess, disappointed or frustrated or upset or whatever about losing or about your Wikipedia edits being erased or undone if that happens. That's perfect content to include in your reflection, and I have had students do that before. Okay, but yes, I do think that the Wikipedia edit assignment, it just makes the world a better place because you are giving people higher quality information than what they already had access to within Wikipedia. But having said that, there are other reasons why Wikipedia is a very important resource for librarians to know, to learn, to understand all of that stuff. And the big reason for that is because Wikipedia has kind of replaced, for reference librarians in particular, Wikipedia has kind of replaced what the old not old dictionaries, what the old encyclopedias used to do. So pre-internet, and I really won't know this by personal experience because the internet was already in full force when I actually started my first librarian job, which was back in 2008. But pre-internet, what a lot of reference librarians would do was when they had somebody come to the reference desk to ask a question, they would start gathering background information by going immediately to encyclopedias, looking to see exactly what the patron was talking about. And from there, they were able to determine what resources they would probably need to use in order to get the patron the information they needed. Reference librarians no longer go to the physical encyclopedias to do that these days. Usually what happens nowadays is as soon as a patron starts talking, and this is my method too, as soon as a patron starts talking, asking a question about a particular thing, if I don't know what they're talking about, I hop on Wikipedia and I start searching, and especially with those links and everything, you can go from page to page to page and get the various information that you need to kind of get started. And from there, again, you can from there determine what else you need to do, what else you need to look at, whether it's a book, database, whatever, in order to acquaint your or connect your patron with the information that they're seeking. But what I would also say to that is that you don't want to make Wikipedia the end resource that you use. So what you do with Wikipedia when you're on the reference desk usually is when patrons are giving you terms you're unfamiliar with. For instance, if a patron names some, I don't know, physical ailment or some mental disorder that you aren't aware of, and you don't want to really grill the patron to get more information on what they are talking about, you might want to actually just go ahead and go to Wikipedia and find out exactly what they're talking about, learn some background information on it. For example, let's say you didn't know what scoliosis was. Let's say that you had a patron that came to the desk and was asking for resources on scoliosis, how to treat it, all of those things. And they didn't want internet resources. You'll have patrons who can be kind of quirky. So let's say they specifically wanted like books, journals, and that sort of thing, and they were not going to let you get away with giving them something from Mayo Clinic or something from WebMD or anything like that. So let's say, again, and you had never heard the term scoliosis before. You might ask your patron to spell it for you if they can, but even if you can't, Google is very good at, did you mean? Yeah. And so if you spell scoliosis wrong, Google might correct that for you. Then they might link you right to that Wikipedia page on scoliosis, and then you read that background information, and then you're like, huh, I know exactly what you need. You need some resources from PubMed, and then you go from there. Or you say, hey, that's listed as a, I've actually got a whole book that you can check out on spine disorders, and you go from there. Okay, so that is the benefit for what you use Wikipedia for, but generally you're not actually going to just pull up a Wikipedia page and refer your patron to the Wikipedia page as reliable information. And that is the next thing we have to get into, is this concept of reliable information. So I am going to say, what I'm probably going to try to do here is incorporate some actual planned pauses. So I am going to say this might be a good time to pause, grab a snack, clear your head, and then come back, and we will talk about why Wikipedia is quote unquote unreliable. And it may not be the reason you've been told. Let's pause. Okay, so why is Wikipedia unreliable? You have probably been told at some point by some teacher or some friend or some whoever that Wikipedia is inaccurate. That is actually not true. Wikipedia is highly, highly accurate. Wikipedia is believed to be, as studies have shown, that Wikipedia tends to be as accurate as Encyclopedia Britannica. So the problem with Wikipedia is not its accuracy, but there is still a reason why generally you're not going to just refer somebody to a Wikipedia page, but rather you're going to use Wikipedia as a starting point to find other resources for them. And those two reasons is because Wikipedia has issues not with accuracy so much, but with authority and with stability. And so let me explain what I mean by that. So authority, when I talk about authority in this case, I'm talking about who authored the information that you're consuming. What you want to do generally, this is part of the whole information literacy gambit that we concentrate on in this field, and there's a lot to that. But when it comes to authority, what I'm talking about is who authored something, and what you want to do is you do want to know who authored the information you're consuming, because you want to know exactly what that person is up to, right? So let's say you, let's say that you pull up a newspaper article and you have a byline and you have the writer that's identified and everything. Knowing who this writer is, knowing that this person, for instance, is affiliated with a newspaper to be an objective writer, that could bode well for you, because you can actually, for instance, contact this writer. And when I was a newspaper reporter in my past life, many, many years ago, yes, people would have my contact information right at the end of the article. They could grill me if they thought that my article was biased. They could ask me questions to clarify. They could, you know, they could do all sorts of those types of things. And then, of course, if I had an error, they could also bring to my attention that, hey, there's an error in this article and you need to fix it, and usually I would. The issue, therefore, with Wikipedia is when you look at a Wikipedia page, it's really not clear who writes this stuff, right? And so you can't vet the intentions of the author if you can't vet or even determine who the author is. And so that's an issue with authority. So, again, also, you know, through reading different sources and knowing who different people are, if you see something that's written by Chris Hayes, you can probably guess that that's going to have some sort of liberal bias. If you read something that's written by Tucker Carlson, you can probably safely assume that there's going to be some sort of conservative bias there, right? And they're not shy about their biases. I don't think Chris Hayes is shy about being liberal. I don't think Tucker Carlson is shy about being a conservative. But it is good to know these biases, and that way you can determine, hey, maybe I'm not going to get the most reliable information about gun control just by reading stuff that Tucker Carlson puts out, or just by reading stuff that Chris Hayes puts out. You may get the most reliable information by reading objective reports, maybe reading even government documents, reading laws and statutes. And then you can also maybe, if you want to try to convince somebody of something, that's when you might want to incorporate arguments that Chris Hayes or Tucker Carlson or whoever is using. But when it comes to Wikipedia, you can't really do that. You don't really know who is putting this information out there. And even though you can go back in and look at the usernames and all of that stuff, most people just generally don't do that. They go to Wikipedia to get the information and to get it quickly. They trust that the community of editors that is responsible for Wikipedia is doing their job. So they're not going and looking and saying, hey, oh, username xval 2020 is added this particular information, and this person is a liberal, so there might be a reason why they added that information, and it might be due to some liberal bias that they have. You know, you can't and don't really do that with Wikipedia. You kind of just take it at face value, okay? And so that's an authority issue that makes Wikipedia, again, unreliable, because a lot of us who teach, we want our students to understand the context and want our students to understand why information is presented the way it is. Is it to persuade? Is it to inform, etc.? Is it to disinform, etc., etc.? And the only way to really know that, not the only way to really know that, but part of what's very essential in knowing that is knowing the biases of the author, knowing who the author is, and being able to contact the author with questions, comments, concerns, and needs for correction. But that's really not the case with Wikipedia. The second issue that we will talk about with Wikipedia and why it would not be considered a reliable source would actually be the stability. So when I talk about stability, what I'm talking about is whether or not a source is saying the same thing today that it's going to say tomorrow. Okay, and the reason why that's important is because materials can be accurate but still be unstable, and Wikipedia is a perfect example of that. So Wikipedia can be completely accurate in what it says one day on Tuesday, July 5th, 2022, and then on Thursday, July 7th, 2022, Wikipedia might say something entirely different, but it could still be accurate, right? Somebody could add a lot more information, or they could take some of the information down, and the page is still accurate. But what we as educators want to do is we want to make sure that when our students are citing sources, that if I look up the sources that they've cited, I'm getting the same information and seeing the same thing that that student saw when they cited it. And there are no guarantees for that with Wikipedia. With newspaper articles, there's less of, most of the time a newspaper article will say the same thing from one day to the next. Now, they do have the capacity these days to update newspaper articles online on the spot. And so, yes, there's a little bit of instability with newspaper articles as well, but it's totally not anywhere near the level of instability with Wikipedia. And then when it comes to magazines, journals, information in databases, a lot of times even, that stuff stays pretty standard, to the point where, yes, if you are looking at what price, for instance, Dow closed at on today, July the 5th, and you look at, if you're looking at that information today, on Thursday, you should probably still have that same figure, right? And that's because that information is stable. But if you're in a situation where you can pull up information on Tuesday and then on Thursday the information is totally different, then you have an unstable source. And we do want to rely on stable sources when we cite things so that we can follow the information, and so we can make sure that the information is being cited appropriately, that it's not being cited out of context, etc., etc. So that's where we are with that. If you want to take another pause, go ahead. We'll pause here, and then we're going to talk about two more things. We're going to talk about Stephen Pruitt, then we're going to talk about Wikipedia editathons. So you can pause here and then pick back up. Pause. Okay, so let's talk about Stephen Pruitt. And I know I mentioned Stephen Pruitt to Wei Ling when I was addressing a question that she had. And some of you were probably like, unless you Googled, some of you were probably like, who was Stephen Pruitt? So here is who Stephen Pruitt is. Stephen Pruitt is a man who has, no, we're not doing all that. Stephen Pruitt is a man who has edited over 3 million articles on Wikipedia, and he's also created thousands of original articles. This is somebody who is, I would say, is even obsessed with Wikipedia to perhaps maybe even an unhealthy level, but I've never met him, so I don't necessarily want to put that on him. But there's a lot of things you can be doing with your time that are probably just as productive or more productive than editing all of these Wikipedia articles. Now, that said, what he's doing is a great service, and he's doing it for free. He is making these Wikipedia pages better that he edits for the most part, and therefore he is connecting people with more reliable information. However, I still think that you should have other hobbies. I do think that people should work out, get physical activity. I think that people should meditate. I think that people should cook and spend time with friends. I think that's how you create balanced people. And I think that if you are, I think that if you exist in a space where you're able to edit over 3 million articles in Wikipedia, you're probably not doing some other things that you could be benefiting from doing, whether that's, you know, taking a walk or a jog or swimming a little bit, or just taking some time to meditate, making sure that your mind is clear and that sort of thing. All the things that go to body and mind wellness, which is stuff that we kind of forget about in this country, honestly. But you know, there are you can't let Wikipedia pages be all of your time, right? But there is a bigger concern that I have here, and that is what are his credentials exactly, right? So here's the thing. We already know, the news is already reported on, and a lot of you already know, that Wikipedia, sorry about that. I got derailed, and actually that was good because I can actually go in another way with this. So a lot of you already know that, and the news is reported on this, that there are troll farms, right? There are foreign troll farms that actually deliberately try to put out disinformation and misinformation and malinformation, and they try to target that to whoever is a convenient audience, to be honest with you. So we know that China and Russia have both targeted disinformation to American audiences, and they've done that for the sake of trying to divide Americans, pit Americans against each other, and disinform Americans to the point where they are not making good voting decisions, or they are not influencing Americans to pressure their politicians to pass the right types of law, or whatever the case may be. We just had, I think, 2 or 3 mass shootings on July the 4th this year. And, you know, that's something that troll farms can get involved with as well. They can target false information about just how severe our epidemic of mass shootings is here in the United States. They can put out bad rhetoric. For instance, there was a European country, was it Sweden or Switzerland? There was a European country that had their first mass shooting a few days ago for the first time since 1994, right? Nearly 30 years ago. But I did see, I'm on Twitter a lot, and I did see people saying, well, this shows that gun laws don't work because they had a mass shooting in this European country that has really strict gun laws. However, let's think about that for a second. There were 3 mass shootings in one day in the United States, at least 3 that I'm aware of, maybe more. But there have been 2 mass shootings in that European country in the past 28 years. Right? So these and I can assure you that some of the entities that were putting out this bad information were very likely troll farms or troll accounts. They were not there to have honest and good faith discussions. They were there to deceive people, to give people bad talking points, to turn people against each other, to distract people from trying to actually solve problems and make our society better. Okay, and so that's what you have to look out for. All right. Now, the reason why I went there, the reason why I mentioned that is because, yes, these troll farms, these entities that are trying to put out misinformation and disinformation, They are mostly using like Facebook, Twitter, and social media to do this. However, I don't see what stops them from actually using Wikipedia to do this. And I think that what could end up happening is you could get a whole bunch of people, uh, you could have like a whole farm that just goes around and creates false information in these Wikipedia pages, but then you can also have their buddies being like the editors and that sort of thing in the community of editors, putting bad information in the talk discussion pages and that sort of thing to try to sway people to keep that bad information in the Wikipedia article and that sort of thing. That could theoretically happen, and if that did happen, then we would have a much, much, much larger disinformation issue in this country, which we already, in my opinion, have a critical disinformation level in our country. I think that if it gets any worse, that could be the failure of the Republic, if the Republic isn't already failed, and that is another discussion for another day. But yes, I believe that Wikipedia could be just as effectively used as a tool to spread disinformation as Twitter is, as Facebook is, and all of that other stuff. And so when you have one guy who has edited over 3 million Wikipedia pages, think about what that means. We don't know what Stephen Pruitt's credentials are. We don't know exactly which information or what information he has put on there or taken out of there or whatever. And we don't know really his motivations behind it. He could probably tell us what his motivations are, but we really don't know what they are in the sense that we know what they are, right? We just have to kind of take him on good faith. And I'm sure that he's a decent person and is not trying to do his Wikipedia edits for the sake of mass disinformation, but that doesn't mean that somebody else wouldn't have those capabilities in the future. Now, it used to be that when I first started talking about Stephen Pruitt, it used to be that there was hardly any information about him on the net, aside from the fact that he had edited all of these Wikipedia pages. However, now he does have a Facebook page. I mean, not a Facebook page, I'm sorry, a Wikipedia page, and it's not an original Wikipedia page. It's not one that he created for himself. It's one that somebody else created. First of all, wow. I would say that I think my homeboy here, I was surprised to learn that he was 38, having seen some of his pictures. I'm 39, and I do think that I look a little younger than him, but that is beside the point. Now we do at least have some information on who he is, and we can use that to kind of gauge how benevolent or malevolent his motivations might be. But I still think this is very scary. I don't think that there should ever be one person out there who pseudo-anonymously is editing just tons of information that people are accessing every day on the internet. I think that this is very dangerous because this Stephen Pruitt, he might be somebody who's safe, but maybe the next Stephen Pruitt is an operative for Vladimir Putin, or maybe the next Stephen Pruitt is David Duke or somebody like that. You know, we just never, ever, ever really know. And as long as we don't know these things, that can be very dangerous. And this is something, when we talk about the information science part of your library and information science degree, one of the things that we are talking about is understanding how information works, understanding how information influences societies and affects societies, and what people actually do with the information that they consume. Okay. And so, yes, Stephen Pruitt is somebody who shows or demonstrates exactly what can be done by just one person on Wikipedia. But there's probably a lot more that's at stake if there is an evil Stephen Pruitt out there ready to give us information via Wikipedia. So the last thing that I'm going to mention are editathons, and I am actually hoping that some of you will participate in editathons in the future. So what an editathon is, and you'll see these on library listservs, you'll see a lot of librarians talking about how they participate in them. You'll see this on you'll see these sorts of opportunities to participate in editathons. You can find those all over the place. Again, they'll be on listservs a lot, and you'll also see them advertised on Twitter, and you might even see them advertised through your company email and that sort of thing. But the reason why edit-a-thons are good and why I always encourage librarians to participate in edit-a-thons is because I think that the people who put out the best information are people who are either experts in their fields, so people who, like, let's say if you are writing about the COVID virus, one of the people who might be a prime participant in an edit-a-thon, it might be somebody who is a virologist and knows a lot about viruses and how they work. And that person can contribute a lot of useful and high quality information to a Wikipedia page about COVID if they are doing so during an edit-a-thon. And they might have some buddies that are, as they're doing their edits on the COVID page, as their participation in the edit-a-thon, you might have one of their buddies talking a little bit about the influenza virus, and you may have one of their virology buddies talking about bacteriophages and that sort of thing, right? So the reason why edit-a-thons are good is because you don't have just edit-a-thons specifically avoid lay people and try to encourage people who really are experts in the field most of the time, or experts on the subject matter, to enhance the Wikipedia pages on the subject matter. So you have the experts in the field, or it can also be journalists. If you're, like, for instance, with sports, you can a lot of times have sports journalists participating in edit-a-thons and enhancing pages, right? But then also librarians. I would say that because librarians are the ultimate generalists, and we are the epitome of generalists, and usually we do love learning information. That is something that tends to be the case with most librarians. Because of that, I think that it is also important for librarians to participate in edit-a-thons, because we know what sources will contribute the best information to an edit-a-thon, whereas a layperson may not know exactly which source they should be using to enhance a Wikipedia page, right? So edit-a-thons, again, you'll see them a lot, and most of the time when I do see edit-a-thons, they are focused on social justice issues or on medical issues, to be honest with you. So again, yeah, a lot of times you might have a nursing edit-a-thon, doctor and nursing edit-a-thon, where doctors and nurses, they get up there for a few hours at a specific time frame. They get up there for a few hours and they might talk about different conditions that people have and how to remedy those conditions and everything like that. And then when it comes to, excuse me for, but when you have librarians actually doing the work, first of all, they tend to be, we are a left-leaning field. And so one thing that you have that's good when librarians are actually entering the fray and enhancing these articles is they are a lot of times looking for EDI issues and social justice issues and that sort of thing, and enhancing based on those things. So for instance, Wikipedia has a huge sexism problem. It does. And in fact, I will link to an article that talks about Wikipedia's sexism issues, so that if you want to, you can use that, excuse me, as some optional reading, and it can be something that you also cite in your Wikipedia reflection paper, right? But let's say that we have a lot of librarians who care about sexism and that sort of thing, and they see that there are a lot of pages that, let's say, for instance, this is one of my favorite examples. Let's say you have a page about a particular subject, and the page overemphasizes the contributions that men have made to learning more about that subject, and it doesn't talk a lot about the women who have contributed, to the women who have done the research and figured things out. Librarians tend to be very sensitive to that type of imbalance, and from there what they can do is correct that type of imbalance, and that sort of thing needs to be done. And it can apply to things other than gender. There could be Wikipedia pages that don't adequately talk about what people of color have contributed, or what people who are LGBTQ plus have contributed, and those sorts of things. So it is good to have people who are social justice minded go in and actually tell a fuller story, so that we're not working specifically from a white male perspective on our Wikipedia pages. Because white maleness in this country, at least, is kind of just to keep it real, it's kind of the normative position, and then everything else is seen as some sort of diversity element. And so what I would say to that is, yes, for instance, me as a Black person, I might have more sensitivities to making sure that some Black stories are told within a Wikipedia page that have been lacking. How did this affect, if it's a Wikipedia page about an event, for instance, how did that event affect Black people, particularly if there was something that you can actually cite that shows that there was a specific effect that it had on Black people that the original page did not have or did not talk about, because it wasn't the concern maybe of, if the editor was a white man, maybe they were not concerned about, oh, how did this affect Black people? And so they focused on something else, that maybe they focused on the population at large. And then someone like me could come in and say, yes, this is what it had for the population at large, but then I can add some edits to say, for African Americans specifically, this also blah, blah, blah. And from there, you have a page that's fuller, that tells more stories, that gives fuller information, and paints a more complete picture, okay? And so here's an example of an invitation for an upcoming Wikipedia edit-a-thon. And in fact, if you all want to be involved in this, then this is the link right here, and you can try to find it. I'll post the link in the announcement as well. But again, these are usually during set times. So on Thursday, July 28th from 11 to 4 Eastern Daylight Time. You can join most edit-a-thons are actually organized or sponsored by libraries. So here's what you have. Join the Ruth Lilly Law Library, the U.S. Department of Agriculture's National Agriculture Library, and Wikipedia Indiana to edit Wikipedia articles on food deserts and local and national food policy, right? And so the people that are probably going to participate in that, they're probably going to be people who deal with food in some sort of way. Maybe they are people who own grocery stores, or people who are in the grocery store business, or maybe they're nutritionists, or people who research social justice issues related to food deserts. But librarians are going to be there too, and librarians are actually going to contribute to these articles during this Wikipedia edit-a-thon. And I assure you that if these are seasoned librarians, what they are going to do is they are going to cite probably newspaper, magazine, and journal articles with the and maybe even some books, especially if they can find ebooks online that they can just link to. But they're going to do those sorts of things in order to enhance the information and make it more robust, more reliable, etc., etc. Whereas you might end up having, for instance, if a nutritionist weighs in, not that I'm insulting the intelligence of a nutritionist, but what if a nutritionist adds some information that's from like some sort of blog or something, and they think that it's perfectly fine because the blog is the blog of some famous nutritionist or something, right? But let's say that that famous nutritionist also has a profit motivation, and so the way they present their blog is actually done in order to help generate some sort of profit for themselves. Nutritionists may not be as sensitive to that sort of thing going on as librarians are. And so that is a key element of information literacy. So I think that is where we can actually end it, and that way we can kind of keep this under 40 minutes, and I hope you have sped it up. If you have any questions, if they are appropriate questions, go ahead and hit me in the inbox or hit the discussion board where the question area is. And with that said, I am Dr. Jace, and, just treat your patrons with grace. And I will see you all next week for a different topic.